This restaurant is 230 years old. Well, not the building, but the trademark is. For perspective, Tokyo, the city, is around 400 years old, meaning that this place is half as old as the city it's in. This place, Sarashina Hori, was opened by Nunoya Tahei, a merchant from Shinshu in Nagano. It serves one of the three major factions of a very special food in Japan, soba. Soba from Shinshu is called Sarashina Soba. It's lighter in color and thinner from the soba you might be used to. And it's made from buckwheat, specifically from the Alps of Nagano, this beautiful mountain range in the middle of the country. This restaurant originally opened in Edo, surrounded by samurai, temples, and feudal lords that would regularly eat here. Even the emperor ordered soba from here. And this shop represents how soba sort of evolved from what was originally this grain for porridge to a mushy flour paste to the elegant and popular noodle dish it is today. Well, actually, soba isn't just one dish, but rather a genre of many different variations. We're gonna navigate across the history of soba, why it's so important to the Japanese, and figure out how it became so integral to the culture of this country. So it feels a bit incomplete to make a video about soba without coming to Nagano. It's generally believed that soba turned into its noodle form in this part of the country. And now Nagano is the most famous region in Japan for soba. This site is valid for Togakushi. Alright, so we just got off the bus and now we're in this small village called Togakushi. This town is one of the most highly regarded locations for soba. And there's even a rumor that every household in this village has at least one professional soba maker. Togakushi is filled with temples and clean water, which is very reminiscent to the kind of places that soba noodles started in. So one of the things that makes Togakushi Soba distinct is the way that it's prepared. So after cooking the soba, it's washed with cold water from the mountains here. And then it's plated in this horseshoe shape that's called a bochi mori. Yeah, that is really refreshing. So you're supposed to slurp the noodles, but I'm pretty bad at slurping. Eating soba in a place like this makes you really feel like this tradition has existed for hundreds of years. And while soba does date back to prehistoric Japan, it wasn't as a noodle until relatively recent. Soba literally means buckwheat in Japan. The grain came to Japan from mainland Asia thousands of years ago, but was originally only cultivated as an alternative to rice. Because soba could grow in poor conditions, like during droughts or famines, a lot of farmers would grow it as a backup plan. These farmers would take the grains and cook it in a porridge, something that's similar to juk, but with buckwheat instead of rice. It's been regarded that soba in this form did not taste good. It was really only eaten to prevent starvation. To make it taste a bit better, these soba grains were made into flour and baked in water to become this paste, which is very akin to something like modern-day sobagaki. Now, I've never had sobagaki before, so let's try this out. Not certain if this is the right way to eat it, but we were told to eat it however we like. It's like superfood? Hang on, I need to eat more of this to see if I actually like it or not. The texture is nice. It's like mochi, but imagine if mochi tasted like water. I don't know if I like it. But this was still only really done to prevent people from starving. But it was a necessary step for soba to become this. So throughout several centuries, noodles were slowly creeping their way into Japan from China. The first record of soba being turned into noodles was in a temple in the Kiso Valley of Nagano. Apparently the temple would feed its workers noodles made with soba. Because of Nagano's terrain and climate, it was quite hard to farm really much of anything on a big scale here. Soba was really the best thing to grow in Nagano, and this prefecture loves it. Alright, this place is officially crazy about soba. Like, they have soba ice cream. And it's really good! Why does this work? So soba was really one of the best things to grow here, and Nagano really loves it. I mean, everything in front of me is made with soba. We have soba dango, soba noodles, soba gaki, and soba tea. Like, even the tea here is made with soba. Soba dango. Let's see what this is like. I've never had it before. Holy cow, that's so good. While I think rice is probably good for maybe more sweet amai dango, soba is really good for like that savory umami taste. This place is also littered with temples and Buddhist monasteries, so soba is sometimes still synonymous with this Zen-esque aesthetic. However, soba in its most modern form most likely comes from Edo, or now Tokyo. Around the 1600s, soba was beginning to move down from the mountains of Nagano into the growing city of Edo. And at the same time, a majority of the city was destroyed by a fire. By the way, one really crazy fact about this fire is that it was started by probably the worst kimono in history. This kimono was owned by 3 girls, all of whom died before they were even old enough to wear it. So after that, they burned the kimono, cause who wouldn't at that point? And a huge gust of wind caused the fire to engulf the entire city. More than half of Edo was destroyed and needed to be rebuilt. And when it was, soba shops opened everywhere. It was even estimated that at one point, every city block had at least 1 or more restaurants serving soba. It didn't matter what class of people you were, samurai, royal, or peasants. Everybody ate soba noodles. And to this day, you can sort of see this spread of soba everywhere. So yeah, that's a lot of soba history. But that means there's a lot of different kinds of soba out there. One of the most iconic soba is kitsune soba, which is basically fried tofu on top of soba. The name kitsune comes from spiritual foxes that often live within shrines, like the famous Fushimi Inari shrine in Kyoto. It's believed that kitsune love fried tofu, and the soba is kind of a tribute to them. Unless you're in Osaka, where it's called tanuki soba, because Osaka likes to be different. By the way, this Osaka thing actually is pretty confusing to a lot of people, because the rest of Japan has its own version of tanuki soba, this soba. Since Osaka calls kitsune soba tanuki soba, they have to call tanuki soba haikara soba. By the way, tempura in general actually goes really well with soba, which is why there is also tempura soba as well. Beyond that, there is a huge list of even more dishes. There's a soba with duck, soba with dried herring, a soba that only uses vegetables from local mountains, a soba that slides down a bamboo water slide, and cold soba, zaru soba. This is what I think is soba in its simplest form. It's basically a batch of noodles on a bamboo plate. You can eat it by dipping it in a sauce called tsuyu, and it's honestly like slurping cold water down in noodle form. Soba in this form may not be as old as some other Japanese traditions like onigiri or miso, but it's so important to the people here and is cherished as the food that honestly kept Japanese people alive and healthy. While Japanese people are obsessed with rice, eating too much of it is actually really unhealthy. If most of your diet was made up of rice, you could develop a thiamine deficiency, which isn't pretty. During the rise of Edo, the city actually had a lot of people suffering from this because they ate too much rice. Soba, however, has a lot of thiamine, and people started eating it to keep their bodies healthy and maintain a balanced diet. From the very beginning, soba started as a grain to keep people from starving to death. And now, soba is eaten to maintain a good nutritional balance. I honestly never realized how important and endearing soba is to Japan. I've always liked it, but to know that it's constantly kept people alive in the worst of times puts it under a whole new light for me. In fact, soba has a lot of positive connotations tagged to it among the Japanese. It's even specifically eaten for New Year's to bring good luck. And it's not surprising to me to see so many soba shops being generations old. When soba was on the rise to becoming the popular dish it is today, there were originally 3 major factions: Yabu from Edo, Sunaba from Osaka, and Sarashina from Nagano. And what's amazing is that you can try all 3 of them today in Tokyo. So this 230-year-old restaurant still maintains the original Sarashina style from centuries ago. This is what I really love about food. Like paintings and books, it's a window into a past that's so far beyond us. But you can't eat a painting and you can't eat a book. Well, at least you're not supposed to. However, to eat something that's relatively been the same for centuries is something I don't think we give enough appreciation for. That's very delicate for soba. It's a lot closer to something like somen, like rice noodles almost. I mean, even the color is different. Soba is usually kind of a bit beige, but this is pretty much white. I also got the soba with this kakeage, which the shop is apparently famous for. It's like tempura almost. Yeah, it's basically tempura. It's really good. Alright, so I'm heading over to another shop called Toranomon Sunaba. The name Sunaba means sand place or sandbox in Japanese. And this style of soba is named this because it was developed during the construction of Osaka Castle, in a shop next to where they store sand for the construction site. The trademark for this shop is over 150 years old, serving the same Sunaba Soba from Osaka. So apparently, this shop uses the inner parts of the buckwheat, which apparently has a more mild flavor, but that's made up for by the tsuyu, which uses an aged soy sauce. Yeah, the tsuyu definitely has a strong flavor to it. It's really nice. Definitely tastes very fermented. Now, the very last shop that I'm gonna try specializes in a school of soba that comes from Tokyo, Yabu Soba. This place is called Kanda Yabu, and it's around 140 years old. Yabu Soba is supposedly the strongest tasting soba among the others. Now, I don't know exactly what strong tasting soba is supposed to mean, so I can't wait to try it out. Alright, so this is Yabu Soba. It is actually a bit green. Apparently Yabu Soba means green soba. It uses a species of soba that has a green shell or something of that sort, and they use that green shell, which gives it this interesting color. I like that a lot. It goes really well with the tsuyu. In terms of food, it's still subtle, but for soba it is pretty flavorful, so I kind of get where they're coming from. Also, this place serves soba sushi. I've never had soba sushi. I didn't know that was a thing. It's jarring. I'll say that much. It's gonna take some getting used to. About a year ago, I made a video on onigiri, this ubiquitous food that I didn't give much thought to, and discovering the history of it gave me a genuine appreciation for it, and what it meant to Japan. Going through the history of soba and discovering all these different places that serve it, I now feel the same way about soba noodles. It's an amazing tradition that is incredibly important to Japan and the people here. One of my favorite things about this country is that you can visit shops that are literally hundreds of years old, where the recipe has mostly been unchanged. Not everywhere offers this privilege, but I get why Japan does it with so many of their dishes. It connects the people in the modern era to a time of their ancestors, and that is extremely intimate. Soba holds amazing significance that I had no idea about. And there's still so much more to the food I didn't get the chance to cover. But if you ever come to Japan or are already here, know that this centuries-old tradition is only a door away.